Order and Emotions, a Dvar Torah for Parashat Matot Masei. Something in the flow of the later Parashat of Sefer Bamidbar doesn't feel right. The Torah seems to jump from topic to topic in a not very orderly fashion. There are many examples of this, but let's take a literary unit that begins and ends with the same subject. After the sin in Shittim and Pinchas' action, we learn about God's command to go to war with Midian, get a census of the Israeli people, read the story of the daughters of Tzlofchad, hear of Moshe's upcoming death and the ordination of Yoshua, take an unexpected leap to learn about sacrifices, 70 verses, make a quick journey to the land of the vows, and finally return to where we started, the war with Midian. Commentators do try to explain the strange order of events, like Rashi, the census, a necessity after the death of so many in the plague, the death of Moshe, so as not to raise false optimism toward entering Israel, the sacrifices, worry for the spiritual well-being of the people as well as for the physical needs, and vows, to teach that just as sacrifices are bought by experts, Kohanim, so vows can be undone by experts. Or Ibn Ezra, the census for inheriting purposes, Moshe's death and Yeshua's ordination, because Moshe wanted to know who would replace him, sacrifices, since these are daily rituals that Moshe won't be here to reside over, and vows should have been written elsewhere, but were written here to explain why Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven should feel obligated to fulfill their vows from later on in the parasha, but none of them felt right. Unfortunately, Rashbam's commentary on these parashiot is missing, because I did like the way he connected between the offerings and the vows based on the Talmud from Rosh Hashanah, since the last verse dealing with the Korbanot ties the vows to the sacrifices during the 3 regalim. But since we don't have the rest of his commentary, it's not clear how he connects these two parashiot with everything else. Rashbam did, however, open a new line of thought. While learning, we were also trying to understand why there's a difference between vows made by men and women. Rabbeinu Ovadia Sforno, for example, claims that this is because women were not in charge of their own time, and therefore it wouldn't be a Chilul Hashem if a woman were to break her vows. The same action on the part of a man, who has more control over his time, would be a statement against Hashem, in whose name the oath was taken. But this interpretation did not explain our initial investigation, so we offered an assumption of our own. Perhaps the parasha dealing with vows is here among the stories of the Midian war, because vows are common in times of danger, as we see when Yaakov runs away from Esav, and with the sailors in the book of Yonah, but with an emphasis on times of war, like the second war of Chorma and Yiftach's war, also with the Midianites, and therefore the laws of vows become necessary now. If we're right, and the vows were taught here because of the war, it could also offer a different explanation for the differences between men and women, and in order to explain our theory, I'd like to present a question. Who finds it more emotionally challenging, the person exposed to danger or the one left behind? As a reservist whose unit was disbanded for a single purpose of preventing him from serving, a long story for another time, I can say that it was much easier for me to participate in Operation Defensive Wall than await an enlistment that never came during the Second Lebanon War. Also be the reason why vows made by men, those who participate in biblical wars and then therefore aware of what's actually happening on the battlefield, are much more binding than women's vows, those left behind to worry, thus making vows based on misinformation and feelings aroused by the imagined dangers they assume their spouses are in. That's how I'd relate the parasha to the general flow. A vow that happens in a time of ecstasy or fear happens because of turbulent emotions, which raise people to incredible heights sometimes, but if we base what we do entirely on emotion, we might find it difficult to sustain that emotion that led us there in the first place. We also need some kind of order to stabilize us. Moreover, relying solely on emotion can lead to huge mistakes if we don't occasionally stop to think. For, although the original call for battle arrives immediately after the Shittim, the Torah initiates a halt, calling for a census, the election of a new leader, the laws of Korbanot called a Seder, Tmidim Kesidran, and setting the emotional world of vows into halachot, some kind of boundaries. Only then can one examine whether this war is continuing as an instinctive, uncontrollable avalanche, or as the measured, correct response. Do I like my answer more than my predecessors? Well, it feels better. Now it needs to be examined in a more orderly fashion and critical eye. As always, if you enjoyed this video, you're more than welcome to press like, to send it on to a friend, and subscribe to my channel. I am Dovi Holtz, one who loves Tanakh.